Carissimi fratelli e sorelle, con profondo dolore devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco. Alle ore 7:35.
Welcome to the Medieval Archives Podcast, the podcast for medieval news, history, and entertainment. I'm your host, Gary, aka The Archivist. Now, we've reached a point in history rarely seen in the last 50 years, the death of a pope and the election of a new pope. Now, the last papal conclave was in 2013, but it wasn't as a result of a death. Pope Benedict XVI resigned, and he was actually the first pope to resign since the Middle Ages. Since 1978, the year of 3 popes, there have been 4 men elected pope. John Paul I in 1978, John Paul II, also in 1978, Benedict XVI in 2005, and Francis in 2013. With the recent death of Pope Francis, there will be a new pope elected and ordained as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church. In this episode, we're going to look at the Papal Conclave, which is the process of electing a pope. We'll see what the cardinals' responsibilities are, how they vote, the voting process, and what happens when a pope is elected. And spoiler, the modern conclave has its roots firmly in the Middle Ages. The rules and traditions were laid out by medieval popes and the medieval church. If you have any questions or comments, or have a topic you're dying to hear on the show, send them over to podcast@medievalarchives.com. Or you can leave us a message on the voicemail line, 720-722-1066. All the show notes for this episode are located at medievalarchives.com/94, the number 9, the number 4. Let's take a look at the Papal Conclave.
Some breaking news to bring you now. This is a statement from the Vatican. A short while ago, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announced, with sorrow, the death of Pope Francis. With these words, he said the following: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis." At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favor of the poorest and most marginalized. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the indefinite, merciful love of the one and triune God.
1978 is known as the year of 3 popes: Pope Paul VI, Pope John Paul I, and then Pope John Paul II. Now, I was a kid when Pope Paul VI and Pope John Paul I died in 1978, and I don't remember hearing anything about his death or the election of the new pope, Pope John Paul II. Now, Pope Paul VI served for 15 years. Pope John Paul I barely made it a month. John Paul I died 33 days after being elected pope. He died of an apparent heart attack, although no autopsy was conducted, so his cause of death is ultimately inconclusive, and the conspiracy theories are rampant about his death and the lack of an autopsy. Pope John Paul II was elected on 16 October 1978, and he served for 26 years. Now, he's the pope I associate the most with the church. He was a fixture throughout the 80s and the 90s. John Paul II died in April of 2005. 2 weeks later, Benedict XVI was elected the new pope. Benedict served just over 7 years, 3 weeks shy of a full 8 years. In a move that stunned the world, Benedict resigned the papacy on 11 February 2013. Papal resignations aren't forbidden, but they are rare. Benedict is the first pope to resign since Celestine V in 1294. And I suppose technically you could say Gregory XII resigned in 1415, but he was forced out during the Western Schism. Now, however you want to look at it, it's been over 600 years since a pope resigned. Benedict's papacy officially ended on 28 February 2013, and he cited old age and deteriorating health as the reasons for his resignation. He lived another 9 years, dying on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2022. Pope Francis was elected on 13 March 2013, and Pope Francis died on 21 April 2025. He served for 12 years and 39 days as Pope. Now, for the first time in 12 years, we will get to see a new Pope elected. The process for electing a pope is called the Papal Conclave and dates back to 1274 when Pope Gregory X issued the papal bull Ubi Periculum, where greater danger lies. Prior to 1059, the pope was chosen in a few different ways. He could be appointed by his predecessors or by a political ruler. At times, the Holy Roman Emperor would appoint the new pope. Papal election did occur, usually as a formality, as a new pope was already picked and appointed. In 1058, Benedict X was elected pope. However, many of the cardinals believed the election was rigged and votes were bought. So in December of 1058, the cardinals who opposed the election of Benedict held their own election and chose Nicholas II as pope. Nicholas declared Benedict excommunicated and deposed him. Followers of Nicholas took control of Rome and forced Benedict out. And then a war broke out between the followers of Benedict and Nicholas. The battles were fought throughout the spring and summer of 1059 until Nicholas and his followers were finally victorious and Benedict officially renounced the papacy. Nowadays, Benedict is regarded as an anti-pope, and that's someone who proclaims to be the pope in opposition to the legitimately elected pope. To be fair, I'm not sure Nicholas was the legitimate pope. The whole affair seems problematic. But Nicholas was victorious, and he called a synod in Rome in April of 1059 to lay out an official process to elect a pope. The synod addressed a few issues of the church, one of which was papal elections. The papal bull In Nomine Domini, in the name of the Lord, codifies the procedure papal elections. The procedure stated that when a pope dies, the cardinal bishops will select a new candidate for pope. Once a selection is made, the cardinal bishops and all the other cardinals will take a vote. Also, the candidate must be a member of the Roman clergy, and the election must take place in Rome. To clarify some terms and to get a view of the hierarchy of the church, cardinals are the senior members of the clergy appointed by the pope. Cardinal bishops are the highest-ranking cardinals. Cardinal priests are one rank below that, and cardinal deacons are one rank below them, the lowest level of cardinal. Now, below the cardinals are the archbishops, and then so forth down the line. So the foundation was laid out for the College of Cardinals in a formalized papal election. It wasn't that simple, though. There was still a problem with the Holy Roman Emperor. The emperor liked picking the pope. It gave him great power over the church. Only the popes didn't like being appointed by the emperor, as they believed only God was above them, not a monarch. This power struggle led to what is known as the investiture controversy, the struggle between the church and the monarchs over whose right it is to install bishops, abbots, and even the pope. It lasted about 50 years and could be an episode all on its own. But for today, we'll sum it up as the power struggle between church and state, and the church eventually winning at the Concordant of Arms in 1122. The agreement between Pope Calixtus II and Holy Roman Emperor Henry V was a victory for the church. Henry renounced all his rights to invest bishops, abbots, and popes, leaving the appointments up to the church. The Pope agreed Henry or his officials could be present when the bishops were installed. That's not much of a concession for the church. They get to choose all their own clergy without the emperors getting involved. And, if the emperor wants to show up at the official ceremony, I guess he can. There's a lot of detail in the Concordant, but it essentially put the power to install clergy into the hands of the church with little to no Holy Roman Empire oversight. So now we jump ahead to 1274 and the Council of Lyon. And here Gregory X lays out the papal bull Ubi Periculum, which sets up the papal conclave method for electing a pope. Gregory issued the bull in response to his own election. The pope prior to Gregory X was Clement IV, who died in November of 1268. The election for a new pope started the same month and continued for 3 years. Now, during that 3-year election, 3 cardinals died and 1 resigned, causing more delays. Now, most of the delays were the result of political infighting and deal-making. Gregory wanted to avoid another prolonged election and established the papal conclave, which confined and isolated the cardinals to eliminate any arguing or brokering for one candidate over the other. It also eliminated any outside influences. The bull laid out a specific procedure for the conclave. So on the death of a pope, all offices stopped work. And 10 days after the pope's death, a meeting is held for the election of a new pope. Cardinals must be present to vote for the new pope. There's no absentee ballots available. Even excommunicated cardinals were allowed to vote, which is an interesting provision, because I thought once you were excommunicated, you weren't allowed to do anything within the church until you made amends. No confession, no Eucharist, nothing. And no one is allowed to leave the conclave once inside, and there's no communication with the outside world. The cardinals all must live in a common room, no interior walls like a big barracks or bunk room. Politics and bribery is strictly forbidden. And if a pope isn't elected within 3 days, the cardinals are restricted to 1 meal a day, and after 8 days, they're reduced to bread, water, and wine. So Gregory had it laid out with specific rules and a specific process to get popes elected quickly and not have a delay at the head of the church. So to sum it all up, once the pope dies, there's a 10-day waiting period, which gave all the cardinals time to travel to the conclave. Now, all the cardinals came together and put in isolation, pick a candidate, and then elect a new pope. Gregory wasn't messing around. He wanted the cardinals to focus on the task of electing a new pope. If they couldn't do it in a timely manner, they would get reduced rations until they could make a decision. And a winning vote is a supermajority of cardinals, 2/3 of the total number. The first election using the Papal Conclave was in 1276, following the death of Gregory X. The conclave took around 1 day, and Innocent V was elected pope. Then it started to fall apart for a while. Innocent died 6 months later, and his successor, Adrian V, was elected smoothly and quickly with the Papal Conclave. Adrian decided he wanted to make some adjustments to the conclave, but died 39 days after becoming pope before any changes were made. The next pope, John the 21st, also elected with the Papal Conclave method, revoked the papal bull and the conclave outright. And he died in 1277 before he could put any new rules in place. And if you're counting, that's 3 popes in 15 months. It's not a good time to be a pope. The next 4 papal elections were conducted without the Papal Conclave method, and they were disasters. The first one took 7 months to elect Pope Nicholas III in 1277. After his death, it took 6 months to elect Pope Martin VI in 1281. Pope Nicholas IV was elected after 11 months in 1288, and saving the best, or probably the worst for last in this case, the election of Pope Celestine V took 27 months. That's right, over 2 years. The very thing Gregory was trying to avoid. Each election was taking longer and longer, and Gregory X had the right idea setting up the Papal Conclave. If only Pope John the 21st would have left that bull in place. Pope Celestine V was a bit of an odd choice for pope. He never rose higher than a monk. He was never a cardinal. After 2 years of deliberation and still unable to elect a pope, Celestine sent a letter to the College of Cardinals stating that if they did not elect a pope soon, divine vengeance would fall upon them. After the dean of the College of Cardinals read the letter, he called out to elect Celestine. The other cardinals ratified his choice, and the hermit monk was now Pope Celestine V. His papacy didn't last long, though, only 6 months, and in that time, he made at least one significant contribution to the papacy. Celestine was elected in July of 1294, and in September, he reinstated the papal bull Ubi Periculum, bringing the papal conclave back as part of the papal election. Shortly after that, he realized he wasn't cut out to be pope, and Celestine resigned the papacy in December of 1294. Celestine holds 2 distinctions for popes. He was the last pope elected in a non-conclave election, and until 2013, he was the last pope to resign under his own terms. Celestine's successor, Boniface VIII, was elected using the conclave and was elected in 1 day. Every pope since was elected using the same papal conclave method. One of Boniface's first acts as pope was to imprison Celestine. The reason was so Celestine or his followers didn't try to install him as an anti-pope. How crazy would it have been if Pope Francis had imprisoned Benedict in 2013? Celestine died in 1296 at the age of 81. He was canonized Saint Celestine in 1313 by Pope Clement V. Now, Pope Clement might be best known as the pope who arrested and executed members of the Knights Templar. Yeah, nobody likes him. In 1298, Boniface enshrined Ubi Periculum into canon law of the Catholic Church, ensuring every papal election would use the conclave. So that's the origin of the Papal Conclave, set up to expedite the election of the Pope and curtail political influence and bribery, and it's been ever-changing since Gregory put it in place. Celestine codified it into canon law, but that hasn't stopped other popes from making changes, some good, some not so good. At one point, there were 4 ways to elect a pope: by accessus, acclamation, compromise, and scrutiny. Accessus is a method where cardinals can change their most recent vote to another candidate to reach the 2/3 majority. That process was abolished in 1945 by Pope Pius XII. Acclamation is when the cardinals unanimously declare the candidate as new pope as if they were all spoken to by the Holy Spirit. The last pope elected by acclamation was Pope Innocent XI in 1676. Compromise is what it sounds like. If there is a deadlock vote, the cardinals delegate the election to a smaller group of cardinals. Whoever that smaller group chooses is the new pope. The last pope elected through compromise was Pope John XXII in 1316. Scrutiny is the election of a pope by secret ballot. In 1996, Pope John Paul II formally abolished election by acclamation and compromise, making scrutiny the only acceptable process to elect a pope. The two-thirds majority vote has been a long-standing requirement for the election, but that doesn't mean it wasn't modified over the centuries. There have been some convoluted methods to reach the number. One of the most obscure methods was if the number of electors was divisible by 3, a pope required two-thirds votes plus 1. However, if the number of electors was not divisible by 3, a two-thirds vote plus 1 plus rounding up to the next number was required. That's way too much math for me. Thankfully, it eventually reverted back to the simple two-thirds of the vote. Not all cardinals are eligible to vote in the conclave. Gregory X laid out only voting in person was allowed. If a cardinal wasn't able to attend the conclave, they couldn't vote. That rule still applies today. Some popes limited the number of electors to 120. In 1970, Pope Paul VI limited the age of electors. Any cardinal over the age of 80 is not eligible to vote. Pope John Paul II codified the over 80 age limit and maximized the number of electors to 120 in a 1996 papal bull. Currently, there are 252 cardinals in the College of Cardinals. Of those, 135 are eligible to vote in the 2025 conclave. Now, according to the Vatican News, all 135 eligible cardinals will vote in the conclave. It'll be interesting to see if the new pope rescinds that 1996 papal bull setting the limit at 120 cardinals. As the College of Cardinals grows in the future, more will be able to vote, or if they'll just ignore that rule like they are for this conclave and let 135 vote. When Pope Francis was elected in 2013, there were only 117 eligible voters. And, breaking news. This just in, it's been announced that Cardinal Lavera from Spain will not be coming to the conclave due to health reasons, so that brings down the number to 134 electors. There's also a Cardinal Giovanni Becciu who renounced his rights as a cardinal in 2020 and then was convicted of embezzlement in 2021. Whether he'll be allowed to vote is still being decided. Once the Pope dies, the Vatican enters a period called Sede Vacante, or vacant seat. It means the papacy is vacant and all official duties are suspended until a new pope is elected. Also, the pope's signet ring is destroyed so no one can falsely use it. Now, one item postponed to the death of Pope Francis is the canonization of Carlos Acutis. It will be up to the new pope to complete this process. All right, so the papacy is vacant and we have the cardinals. We know who can be elected and who's eligible to vote. So when the cardinals arrive in Rome, where do they stay in isolation away from the outside world? Vatican City, of course. Now, throughout the Middle Ages, the location of the papal conclave changed. The cardinals would gather where the pope died and stayed in whatever accommodations were available. The papal conclave of 1492, when Rodrigo Borgia was elected pope, was the first conclave held in the Sistine Chapel. Since 1492, the conclaves have all been held in either the Sistine Chapel or the Vatican Palace. John Paul II laid out that cardinals were to stay in St. Martha's house, adjacent to St. Peter's Basilica. All voting takes place in the Sistine Chapel. Now, what exactly happens during the papal conclave? We have a broad view of what goes on. They can find the cardinals, they pick the candidates, they elect the pope, and if the process takes too long, we start taking away food. But what goes on behind the closed doors, and how do we know when a pope is elected if it's all in secret? Let's look at the inside of the papal conclave. So on the morning of the start of the conclave, the cardinals attend Mass at St. Peter's Basilica. In the afternoon, they go to the Sistine Chapel, and they take an oath to observe the procedures of the conclave, to maintain secrecy, and to disregard any outside influence, and if elected as pope, to defend the Catholic Church. Once the oath is taken, everyone's kicked out. Now, up to this point, non-voting individuals like bishops or archbishops are allowed to witness the oath. The master of papal celebrations orders everyone out yelling, "Extra omnes," outside all.
Extra omnes.
and then he escorts everyone out to the door and closes the door behind him. With that, the conclave and the election process is underway. Not all non-voting individuals are kicked out. There are a number of supporting staff in the conclave. The secretary of the College of Cardinals stays, the master of papal celebrations, the commander of the Swiss Guard, a number of serving staff to prepare meals, cook meals, housekeeping. And then there are 2 doctors who are also admitted into the conclave for any medical issues that'll come up. All of the support staff that stay also take an oath of secrecy, the same as the cardinals. So the doors are sealed. The senior cardinal recites the prayers and asks if anyone has any doubts on the procedure. If any doubts are raised, they are addressed, and then the election process begins. Now, once the process begins, all contact with the outside world is forbidden. Once those doors are sealed, the cardinals cannot talk to anyone, punishable by immediate excommunication. Which brings up the point of Gregory X's papal bull, which allowed excommunicated cardinals to vote. So somewhere between that papal bull and what John Paul II laid out, excommunicated cardinals can no longer vote. In 2013, the Vatican stepped up their countermeasures and swept the entire Sistine Chapel for any hidden bugs, cameras, or any kind of device that could be used to transmit to the outside world. The internet and the Wi-Fi are blocked, and signal jammers are used to prevent any form of radio or mobile phone communications. And going one step further this year is they also have anti-drone weapons so that no drones can film or get in or record anything inside the Sistine Chapel. They don't fool around with cybersecurity and secrecy in the papal election. So the cardinals are locked inside. The Sistine Chapel is clear of all communication devices. Now the cardinals can start voting. And they can either vote the afternoon after their morning prayers, or they can wait until the following day and start voting in the morning. If the voting starts that first afternoon, there'll be 2 votes taken. And then on one full day of voting, there are 4 votes taken, 2 ballots in the morning and 2 ballots in the afternoon. If a new pope isn't elected after 3 days, the vote is suspended for 1 full day for prayer and an address by the senior cardinal. After that break, voting continues for another 7 cycles, 3.5 days. If after those 7 votes no one is elected, another day is taken for prayer and reflection. This process continues for 3 more cycles of 7 votes. If after those 21 votes no one is elected, the top 2 vote getters are left on the ballot for a runoff vote, still requiring 2/3 majority. Now, the voting process is called the scrutiny, and for the entire process, there's 3 phases of the scrutiny: the pre-scrutiny, the scrutiny, and the post-scrutiny. The pre-scrutiny is the setup phase. The master of ceremony prepares the ballots and hands them out to the cardinals. Then there are 9 names drawn at random, and the first 3 names are the scrutineers. I've got to come up with a better name for that. The scrutineers sounds like a bunch of pirates. The scrutineers. The cardinals who accept and count the ballots. They're the scrutineers. The other 6 names drawn are the backups. There are 2 ballots in the morning, like I said, and 2 in the afternoon. For each session, morning or afternoon, a new set of 9 names are drawn. The scrutiny phase is the voting. The cardinals write the name of their choice on the ballot, and then in order of seniority, they take their ballot up to the altar and hand the ballot to the scrutineers, and then they recite the following oath. I call as my witness Christ the Lord, who will be my judge, that my vote is given to the one who before God I think should be elected. This process continues until all the ballots are collected. If for some reason, like a sickness, a cardinal is confined to his room, one of the backups will go to the room with a ballot box to collect that cardinal's vote. That's not the same as an absentee ballot. That cardinal is still locked in, sworn to silence. He just came down with a sickness or is unable to attend the actual Sistine Chapel vote. Now, when the ballots are collected, the first scrutineer shakes and opens the ballot box, and the third one counts all the ballots. Now, he's not counting the votes. He's just counting the ballots. He ensures the number of ballots in the box is equal to the number of electors. If there are 134 electors at this current conclave, and the number of ballots is less than 134, or even worse, it's more than 134, then the ballots are immediately burned and the voting is repeated. No votes would be counted. If the number of ballots equals the number of electors, then it moves to the counting of the votes. The ballots are opened, and each of the 3 scrutineers writes down the name on the ballot. Then the name is read aloud. When all the ballots are opened and the names read out, the process moves into phase 3, the post-scrutiny. In the post-scrutiny phase, they add up all the votes. The backup scrutineers check the ballots and the names written down to make sure there are no errors. Once verified, and if no one received 2/3 vote, then another vote is taken. When the voting is complete for the morning session or the afternoon session, the ballots are burned. Now, the burning process is the only indication the outside world has that voting is complete and a pope was or was not chosen. There's a special chimney installed in the Sistine Chapel for all to see. When smoke emerges, the public knows the result of the vote. It's the color of the smoke that indicates whether a pope was elected or not. In the past, the color of the smoke was based on the sealing wax used to seal the ballots. Today, they use chemicals to give it a distinct color and avoid any kind of confusion. The world anxiously awaits smoke from the chimney. Black smoke pouring out of the chimney indicates no one received the 2/3 vote and the process continues. If white smoke comes billowing out, then a new pope has been elected. The conclave is over and a new pope will soon be introduced to the world. I'm sure they're going to have a live stream set up to watch the chimney during the conclave, and I'll have that live stream set up on the website at medievalarchives.com. So when the conclave starts, head over there to check out the chimney watch. Once the world sees the white smoke, the election's over, and the secretary of the College of Cardinals and the master of papal ceremonies is called in to witness the new pope's acceptance. The cardinal dean asks the pope-elect if he accepts the election. The pope-elect can accept or he can refuse. Now, if he accepts and he is already a bishop, he is immediately the new pope. If he isn't a bishop, he goes through the process of getting consecrated as a bishop, then he's the new pope. Now, technically, any baptized Catholic male can be elected pope. The papal bull we discussed earlier in Nomine Domini set down that only cardinals could be elected pope. But since that papal bull was issued, 6 non-cardinals have been elected, all from the Middle Ages. The last non-cardinal elected was Pope Urban IV in 1378. Urban's election was part of a bigger issue in the church, which eventually led to the Western Schism. So now, for the last 700 years or so, it's always been a cardinal that's been elected pope. Now, once the pope-elect accepts and takes the position, he decides his papal name. Pope John II was the first to take a new name when he became pope. John II was elected pope in 533 and was given the Roman name Mercurius at birth. Now, he thought that name was inappropriate for a Catholic pope since the name Mercurius glorified the Roman god Mercury. Since John II in 533, almost every pope has chosen a new papal name. There have been some exceptions over the years, but not too many. Once the Pope-elect accepts, the Cardinal Dean asks him in Latin his papal name, asking, "By what name shall you be called?" The Master of Papal Celebrations records the acceptance and the papal name in a Vatican document. A pope chooses his name based on a variety of reasons, and they're usually personal reasons. In 1978, Pope John Paul I chose his name to honor the 2 popes before him, John the 23rd and Paul the 6th. Now, John Paul II took his name as a tribute to John Paul I. Pope Francis chose his name to honor and respect St. Francis of Assisi. After the Pope accepts and chooses his name, he is escorted into a small room in the Sistine Chapel called the Room of Tears. Now, it's given this name for all the emotions experienced by the new Pope, and it's said they usually weep when they're in this room. Now, when the Pope has had time to pray and reflect, he dresses himself in the full pontiff robes. Once the Pope is ready, the senior cardinal deacon goes out on the balcony of the basilica and proclaims the new Pope to the waiting crowd and the world. For Pope Francis, it would have sounded like this: "I announce to you a great joy. We have a new Pope, the most eminent and most revered Father, Lord Jorge Mario, Cardinal of the Holy Roman Emperor Church, Bergoglio. He takes to himself the name Francis." And here it is by the Cardinal Deacon.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam. Eminentissimum ac reverendissimum Dominum Georgium Marium, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae Cardinalem Bergoglio, qui sibi nomen imposuit Franciscum.
The cardinal deacon then leaves the balcony and the new pope emerges to greet the crowd while a band plays the papal anthem. Well, you can hear a little bit here, and I'll play it on the way out as well. Now, after the crowd and pomp and circumstance dies down, the Pope gives a blessing to the crowd and to Rome. Following the introduction, there's a formal papal coronation. The new Pope is crowned with the papal tiara. The last 5 popes have refused to wear the tiara. The last one to wear it and hold the coronation was Pope Paul VI in 1963. Pope John Paul I was the first pope in over 800 years not to have a papal coronation during his inauguration. There's nothing stopping them from having a papal coronation, so we'll see if the new pope decides to have one or not. The papal inauguration is a mass held in St. Peter's Square a few days after the election of the pope. And after the inauguration, the pope is greeted by various archbishops and clergy and those who travel to Rome to celebrate the new pope. The papal inauguration and coronation are both symbolic. The pope is the pope immediately after the election results and his acceptance. If the inauguration were to never take place, it doesn't nullify the election or the new pope. And just like that, the conclave is over. Thanks to a few level-headed medieval popes, the entire process, from the death of a pope to the election of the new pope, is completed within a month, and it's corruption-free, or at least we hope it's corruption-free. It's better than the months and oftentimes years it took in all of the political dealings and briberies that were in the Middle Ages. While there are 134 cardinals who can become pope, there are speculation on a few who might be the favorites. One is Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He is the most senior cardinal under the age of 80, and he'll also preside over the conclave. Now, if he's elected, he'll be the first Italian pope since Pope John Paul I in 1978. Quick side note, Pope John Paul II was Polish, and he was the first non-Italian pope in 455 years. Other frontrunners for pope are Peter Turkson of Ghana, Luis Antonio Taglia from the Philippines, and Peter Erdo from Hungary. And if you want to know who the favorite is, there's already a betting line on the papal conclave. Parolin, Taglia, Turkson, and Erdo are all the frontrunners and favorites. Now, the American and the UK cardinals are huge underdogs. I don't see an American becoming pope anytime soon. Probably not in my lifetime, probably not my kid's lifetime. The formal process for papal conclaves emerged in the Middle Ages. You know what else has roots in the Middle Ages? That's right, betting on papal conclaves. Betting on papal conclaves is recorded as far back as 1419. Now, since 1591, it's been an excommunicable. You can get excommunicated for betting on papal conclaves. It's easy for you to say. Instead of risking your eternal soul by betting on the papal conclave, you could send a guiltless, sinless donation to the Medieval Archives at medievalarchives.com/support. And you can help support your favorite medieval podcast.
Thanks for your support.
Pope Francis was laid to rest on 26 April 2025. The Papal Conclave of 2025 is scheduled to start on 7 May 2025, presided by Cardinal Pietro Parolin. Now, Pope John Paul issued a constitution to the Church in 1996, setting the conclave start date 15 days after a pope dies. Now, 7 May would be 16 days after the death of Pope Francis, so they gave him one extra day for travel or just to prepare for the conclave. As the Papal Conclave of 2025 gets started on 7 May, head over to the website, medievalarchives.com, to check out the chimney cam, or whatever they're going to call it. I'll also send out updates on the conclave process over social media channels like X, Mastodon, Blue Sky. All the links are going to be in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about the Papal Conclave, a process laid out in the Middle Ages and still in use today. It's a process we don't often see. This is the 5th time that has happened in my life. I don't even remember the first 2 conclaves in 1978. Now, for some, this is going to be the first conclave they've ever witnessed. Check out all the show notes at medievalarchives.com/94 for all the links to social media for the chimney cam, the bibliography, anything extra that you want to know, it's going to be in the show notes. Now, if you're looking for a good book on popes, I'd recommend Absolute Monarch by John Julius Norwich. And you can get a free copy of it on Audible by going to medievalarchives.com/free book. You have to sign up for a free trial, but you can cancel that at any time, and the free book is yours to keep. And I use Audible all the time. It's a great service, and Absolute Monarchs is a great book about the history of the papacy. Send your comments and questions to podcast@medievalarchives.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, please help support it, and the easiest way to do that is to tell your friends about it. If you're listening on your smartphone, send them a link right now and say, hey, the Papal Conclave's coming up. Here's everything you need to know about it. And if you're getting value from the show, consider supporting the show with a financial donation. It helps keep the show and the website ad-free and full of great content. You can find all the support links in the show notes or at medievalarchives.com/support. Now, thank you for your time and thanks for your continued support. That's going to wrap it up for this week, so enjoy the Anthem of the Vatican on the way out. Thanks again for subscribing and listening to the Medieval Archives podcast, illuminating the dark ages for the digital world.